you mentioned the ladder, the ladder doesn't necessarily need to point upwards. You can be going sideways and still feel that you are progressing. I was doing a workshop a while back for a big technology company. There was this particular one that said, I've been in the business for 30 years and I'm known as the master of the lateral move. So even though he was not, getting VPs or executive VP or corporate VP, he was just really happy about moving sideways here and there.
Just yesterday I was talking to a client, a human resources director, who was lamenting the fact that they lost a really terrific performer to a competitor, to a role that they could have given this person within their organization had they only known.
Hello, my name is César, and I'm going to start. 3, 2, 1. Hello, my name is César, and I'm the founder and managing director of Dharma Center for Wellbeing, and I would like to welcome you to Re-Engaged at Work, a podcast designed with you in mind to help you improve engagement, retention, and performance through workplace well-being. Now, before we get started, make sure to click on the subscribe button below so you can be the first to benefit from the wisdom, knowledge, and experience of our distinguished guests. And speaking of distinguished guests, I am very pleased to welcome to today's episode, Winkle Giulioni. And Julie, I will introduce her properly in a moment, but just for you to know, she's a best-selling author and a top international speaker on topics related to workplace growth and development. So Julie, hello, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Looking forward to a wonderful conversation.
All right, and just so you know, Julie is the author of Promotions Are So Yesterday, Redefining Career Development, Help Employees Thrive. She's also the co-author of the international bestseller Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go, Career Conversations Organizations Need and Employees Want, which has been translated into 7 languages. She is a regular columnist for Training Industry Magazine and Smart Brief, and contributes articles on leadership, career development, and workplace trends to numerous publications, including Fast Company and The Economist as well. Julie was named by Inc. magazine as a top 100 leadership speaker, and her work has earned Julie praise and awards from Human Resource Executive Magazine, New York Film Festival, Brandon Hall, and Global HR Excellence Council. So, Julie, I am so delighted that you've decided to accept our invitation to be part of today's episode.
It is an honor.
So, Julie, you and I, have connected before, and we talked about obviously the importance of career development. And let me just kind of do a little intro from my point of view, and then, of course, I really want to pick your brain as to what's the best way to go about it. Last time that we spoke, we talked about how out of all of the psychosocial hazards that could actually create mental ill health in business, the top 5 are, bullying, harassment, and discrimination. And it's interesting how, lack of career development has actually made it into the top 5 of psychosocial hazards that are actually creating mental ill health in the workplace. And so this is actually such an important topic to tackle and such an important topic to get right. But I think that a lot of businesses are being misguided as to what career development actually entails, and a lot of individuals as well should take responsibility for their own career development, and they should take responsibility for really knowing what's the best way to go about it, right? And because there's an element of individual accountability in this process as well. So that's kind of the main topic that I want to discuss with you today, Julie. And so my first question to you is, what does career development actually mean? How would you define it from your standpoint, then, Julie?
That is such a great starting point. Such a simple and yet really profound question. Because if you ask 10 people what career development means, it may take on a little bit different or a lot different complexion depending upon the person. Today, career development really is about figuring out how individuals and leaders and organizations can partner to help everyone, all of us, move forward and toward our success definition, our goals, what we're looking to achieve. And that is in stark contrast to how we've thought about career development in the past. It's fascinating to me that this notion of career development has almost become frozen in time. When you talk to people about what it means, what it looks like, the picture that typically comes to mind is some kind of a ladder, right? We just kind of default to this notion of climbing the corporate ladder. And yet, in most organizations today, the ladder is pretty rickety. It's missing some rungs. Maybe it's toppled over in some cases. There just aren't the same, sometimes the volume or the opportunity of volume around movement, promotions, new positions. And yet, if we're holding on to that mental model in our minds, we naturally have a sense of dissatisfaction. It's not fitting our pictures, that we have in our minds when we're not making those, moves every 16 months or whatever it might be. And in many cases, that's what's driving the disengagement and the lack of a sense of wellness and thriving at work. And it's really, as you mentioned, learning development, career development are rising in terms of the level of distress that they're causing, the way they're hurting engagement and productivity and results in the workplace. And it's really a wake-up call for leaders and organizations alike.
Now, there's a key. I was making notes, and I wrote down three keywords that you've mentioned. So, first of all, I love the element of partnership. Career development is a partnership. It's not just something that the company is solely responsible of doing or the individual is solely responsible of pursuing. It's a partnership. There needs to be a joint effort, in making sure that people feel that they are progressing. And then you mentioned something about the definition of success. And it's such an important thing to know, what does success look like, to you? Is it an end goal? Is it the progression of, or the realization, the progressive realization of worthy goals? And you mentioned the ladder. The ladder doesn't necessarily need to point upwards. The ladder could be actually horizontally as well, because you might not be perhaps, going up the ladder. You can be going sideways and still feel that you are progressing and still feel, that you are succeeding. And there was this, I was doing a workshop a while back for a big technology company, and the managing directors actually were introducing themselves in the room. And there was this particular one that said, I've been in the business for 30 years, and I'm known as the master of the lateral move. So even though he was not, getting VPs or executive VP or corporate VP, he was just really happy about moving sideways here and there, and for him, that was, career progression as well. Right.
Yeah.
So what's your view on that?
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about the business landscape, the org chart in most organizations, there's a lot more opportunity laterally, horizontally across the organization than there is up. I mean, it's the physical nature of the workplace. The other thing that I would say is, and increasingly, I think we're hearing people say, I'm the master of making the most of where I am as well, because we don't have to actually go anywhere, laterally, upward, diagonally, anywhere in order to grow. And increasingly, what leaders and employees are recognizing is the only thing we've got control over is where we currently are, the current role. And most of us can make a lot more out of that role than we currently do. And we can do that, within our sphere of influence. So I look forward to a time when, it's a badge of honor to say, I was able to make this one role really juicy and meaty, and it helped me to thrive, even though I was there maybe for, 8 years or something of that nature. And, I want to spend a moment talking about that word partnership, because for me, this is really the key to sustainability. We can push organizational objectives and make those come into the foreground, but that's at the expense, in some cases, of the goals and the desires of employees and managers. We can put the leaders' goals up front, but if we aren't bringing these three together in sync, if it's not a win-win-win, then that's not sustainable. I mean, you can do it for a little while, but I think part of why we're seeing the level of disengagement and burnout that we're seeing in the workplace today is that sometimes the employees, goals are not being prioritized in the same way. Conversely, if it's all about, what the employee wants to learn and how they want to grow, that may not serve the needs of the organization. So bringing this into concert, really understanding that for all of us to thrive, survive long term, we're in this together.
Yeah. All right. So let's say that there is desire from the company and the intention to actually promote and structure and set up everything that needs to be done in order to provide career development opportunities for employees. And let's say that the employees actually have, again, the desire, the intention of getting serious about this. Okay, so I want the next few minutes to talk about what is it that individuals need to do on their end of this partnership. What is it the companies need to do on their side of this partnership, and then eventually what are the benefits. So let's start with the individual. Let's say that someone's listening to us right now and they're really keen on getting a grasp on what is it that I practically need to do in order to initiate this process. What would your recommendation be, Julie?
Well, and I love that we're starting with the employee, because at the end of the day, as individuals, we've got to own our career development. Nobody's going to care about it as much as we do. And so for the individual, it starts by really stepping back and looking at, what kind of relationship do I want with my work? And what is that definition of success that you had kind of double clicked on earlier? It means thinking more broadly than that classic ladder-based definition of what career development is, and looking a little bit more deeply within to consider, what do I want and need out of the work that I'm doing now, today, which might be different than it was a year ago, might be different than it's going to be in 6 months. And as I was doing research over the last 10 years or so, what I found was that in addition to climbing the corporate ladder, of course, that's always going to be part of our organizational psyche and structure. There are 7 other things that employees are really interested in, that ways that we want to grow. Things like contribution and competence and connection. Things like challenge, contentment, choice. So we've got a whole, as individuals, we've got a much broader library or menu to choose from today. So the first thing is to get clear on, what's that relationship? What do I want out of my job? How do I want to grow? Because once we know that, then we're in a wonderful position to be able to take ownership and be really proactive about approaching one's manager or leader with a clear-eyed view of what success is going to look like. And that then is a really solid, informed foundation for the kind of partnership that we need between the individual, the leader, and the organization in order to move that forward. And I think the other thing from an employee standpoint that we can't overstate the importance of is, as individuals, we need to keep looking around the corner. I don't need to tell you, the world is changing so fast. The workplace is changing so fast. The roles that we are going to be assuming changing so fast. You think about a year ago, we barely knew what an AI prompt engineer is. And now it's one of the most important roles that we're recruiting for. So as individuals, the other thing that we can do to serve ourselves in terms of future-proofing our own careers and serve the organization is to be looking around the corner and anticipating, so that we're what's that expression? There's that hockey player who talks about, hitting the puck to where it needs to, where it's going to be going in the future rather than where it needs to be right in this moment.
And Julie, so again, I've made a few notes here, right? And you mentioned that individuals should deeply, they should go within and really understand what they want and what they need. And the first thing that came to mind was that a lot of people might be thinking, but isn't that a selfish thing, to let my employer know what is it that I want, what is it that I need? When in reality, there's nothing wrong with that, because as you were saying, there might actually be a business need, that coincides, or aligns, with that want or that need that you have. And if you haven't expressed that, then, how are you going to be able to make that match? So on the contrary, it's important for people to really be vocal about what they want and what they need. I'll tell you my experience. When I used to work for Motorola, about 1,000 years ago, I expressed what I wanted and I expressed what I needed. And at the time, I was literally told, this is what you want. Actually, these are the only options that we've got, and you're too senior for this. So and we actually had a really good conversation about this with really key people in HR that I really appreciated at the time. And then months later, another program came up, another project came up, and guess what? It suited what I wanted, and from the very beginning. So even though I didn't get it the first time around, because I was vocal about it, they thought of me and they asked me if I wanted to apply, and here I am. So that's one thing, right? So what's your message to those people that feel trepidation about communicating their wants and needs?
Just yesterday, I was talking to a client, a human resources director, who was lamenting the fact that they lost a really terrific performer to a competitor, to a role that they could have given this person within their organization had they only known. So if we're not expressing our needs, our wants, our preferences, how we want to grow, we're not just holding ourselves back, we're hurting the organization as well. Because as you said, once we put that on the radar screen, well, maybe it's not available today or tomorrow, but next week or next month, folks at least know. And it goes back to the partnership as well, doesn't it? Because it's not selfish to express one's needs. That is what having our needs met over time is what creates a sustainable system. So if I'm not expressing that, I'm not putting my managers in the organization in a position to be able to help co-create that. It's actually selfish, more selfish, to withhold that information because it hurts me in the organization too.
And something else that you mentioned, Julie, that and as you were saying this, I was going like, oh my gosh, because I made a mistake about this. So you were talking about the importance of making sure that you understand, yeah, again, what does success look like to you? Do you want a role in which you have a significant contribution that's challenging, a role that gives you choices, or a role that allows you to connect more? And when I started managing at first, I actually thought that most of my team members actually wanted the same thing, and although I was trying to, promote opportunities that were challenging to some of my team members, they were not really interested in that. They were interested in the connect, in the sense of belonging, in the connection aspect of it, So, and so I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way when I was being frustrated about my team members not progressing in the areas that I thought they could do really well at, because their interests lied somewhere else. So I learned that the hard way, unfortunately, but it's really important. And then something else that I wanted to ask you in connection to this as well is, what's the relevance and what's the importance of someone really knowing their strengths and really knowing their talents? We've heard so much of the the Gallup Strength Finder and all of these different tools that you have available to you to understand what are your 32 signature themes. So what do you think of those tools, and what do you think is the importance of really having a very clear understanding on your inventory of strengths when it comes to career development.
Yeah. So let's go back to the first point around assumptions. And Caesar, you are in good company in terms of making those assumptions. I think so many leaders do. And it's not ill intended. It's just, we know how we're feeling, what we want. We just kind of project that on those around us. And that's why it's so important for leaders and individuals to have an ongoing dialogue, to have that kind of open give and take so that the leader really understands who that person is, what's motivating them, what's interesting to them. I can't tell you how many client organizations I've gone into where I see managers, again, with the best of intentions, assuming that their whole staff wants to climb the corporate ladder right along with them, pushing them up and putting people in a position where they actually leave the organization because they were perfectly happy doing what they were doing. They wanted to keep growing. They wanted, maybe some expanded responsibility or whatever it might be, but they didn't necessarily want that next role. I think as leaders, to the extent that we can replace the assumptions that we bring to the relationship with a really abiding sense of curiosity, to understand, to learn more, to really wrap our heads around who this person is, gives us so much more to work with. And it gives us so much more to work with within the context of one's current role. I might start to sound like a broken record here. As a leader, and certainly as an individual, but even as a leader, we have pitifully little control over whether somebody gets to move to another role. There are so many factors that play into that. What we can control is what we invite into the envelope of that current role. That's where we can create the sense of contribution or competence or connection and belonging, whatever it is that might be most meaningful. We can do that within the context of the current role if we get rid of those assumptions, or if we start to untrain ourselves to default to those assumptions. And then the second thing that you were talking about was, what's the importance of strengths and understanding one's strengths and talents. And I would say self-awareness in general is essential. Whether it's strengths and talents, whether it's blind spots, whether it's, what you don't want to do, whether it's your values, I think really understanding ourselves. And to be honest with you, the art of reflection is quickly dying. We just don't typically take the time to do that kind of internal work these days for many of us. But strengths and talents are especially important to understand because we know from the research that when we're able to deploy those and bring the expression to those day in and day out at our work, that elevates our sense of achievement, our sense of well-being, our sense of happiness and engagement with the work. So you can't do that consciously if you're not aware of that. And then those strengths too, it's so interesting as we look at the future of work, and we're looking at what AI will be able to do and not do for us. The one thing that we know it's not going to be able to replace is the humanity. And so as individuals start to dig deeply into understanding themselves and the unique skills and talents that only they as human beings can bring, it gives us an opportunity to really lean into an exciting future and do what's uniquely human at a higher and higher level.
This is great, Julia, and this is really, really, really useful. Now let's talk about the other partner. Okay, let's say that the business needs to find a way to, and as you know, I come from the world of IT, and I think of frameworks and structures and processes. How do we, operationalize the desire of being able to effectively capture the wants, the needs, the desires of the individual? How can we learn about, how can we minimize the assumptions, that we were referring to? What part of the process helps us to minimize those assumptions? What are the key elements that can allow us to, again, create some kind of mechanism that allows us to do this consistently throughout the business. It doesn't matter if it's a business of 20 people or 200 people or 2,000 people, right? What are the basic components you'd say that the company needs to put in place in order to, get this going?
I think there are three themes that organizations who really want to use career development as a powerful lever for engagement and wellness, thriving results. Three themes that they can prioritize and take a look at. First has to do with a wholesale, wide scale redefinition of what career development is. The organization needs to say, we're not defining career development exclusively in terms of moves around the org chart. In our organization, this is what development looks like, with an articulation that speaks to the way we can take a current role and keep growing that and growing within that, as opposed to making those moves. And really being serious about that, having it not be, okay, this is the position we take with employees, but for ourselves, as executives, we're still climbing that corporate ladder. So really, really redefining career development in much broader terms that are within the sphere of influence and ability for leaders and managers to affect, and messaging that far and wide. The second thing has to do with the leader's role, because at the end of the day, we can put together all sorts of administrative systems to make sure that career development conversations happen, once a year or twice a year or every month. We have the technology to be able to do that, and systems where you can track that and people can put their information in. But so frequently, what I'm finding is that leaders get confused, especially busy leaders who are just really trying to do the right thing and to get it all done despite the fact that their plates are overflowing with priorities. You get confused and sometimes begin to think that complying with the system or the process is doing career development. And so, okay, check that off the list, done. What I've really found over the last couple of decades of working with this is that career development at its core is a relationship between manager and an employee, or a leader and employee. And it's a relationship that plays out through conversation. And if leaders have not internalized this notion that career development is the ongoing relationship, it's not the events over the year, but it's the ongoing relationship. It's the way they show up every time they cross paths or speak with that employee. If we don't get to the point where leaders understand that development isn't the icing on the cake, it's the cake. It's the number one priority that as a leader we should have, because everything else falls from that, right? I mean, everything comes from well-developed staff. Once we shift that kind of and instill that kind of a mindset, then it's just sustainable. I mean, the systems, the processes, they become important checkpoints, for manpower and succession planning, but that's not what's driving it. It really is the internal spirit of the leader. And then finally, I think to update, to retool, organizations need to honor development in all of its forms equally. Right now, we honor a move up the ladder. We honor it with celebrations. We have cake. We give people promotion or more money. That is what gets honored and celebrated. Not so much when we do more within the context of our current role. A couple of years ago, I keynoted for LinkedIn's Career Week. And as we were talking about it, it dawned on me, even at LinkedIn, I mean, such a preeminent organization in the workplace landscape. The only way you could celebrate, the button that they had was promotion. Celebrate, I just got this new job. And I said, what if we started thinking more about celebrating my growth in the job? And so today, and I'm not saying it's my fault, I'm sure somebody smarter than I was thinking about it already at LinkedIn, but today you can celebrate a certification or a new learning that's been done. We need to start honoring in organizations, honoring what happens in the role in terms of growth as much as what happens outside of the role. And the really dicey part of this is the compensation piece of it. And I know, I've got clients in HR who are just working overtime to figure out how do we decouple some of the compensation issues from the role issues and create or eliminate, I guess, the unnatural incentives that frequently force people into a new role only to get that bigger paycheck.
Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole episode on the whole, decoupling the compensation element. It's such a huge, huge topic. But one of the things that I really liked about the three main components of, where to get started as a business with career development, you mentioned obviously defining what career development means to the business, and then of course, the role that the leader plays, and then obviously honoring and celebrating, and ritualizing the celebration of growth as instead of just upward progression. And the reason why I like this is because, again, it applies to a business that employs 15 people or 100 or 1,000. You don't need, super expensive platforms or super complicated, and convoluted procedures and processes, to do that. I mean, this is fairly straightforward. And actually, let me share with you another anecdote regarding the leadership roles. At a company that I was working with, a big company a while back ago, we had the mid-year review and then the end-year review. And the company decided to actually scrap the mid-year review and the end-year review because what was happening is that these ongoing conversations that you were referring to were not happening. It's like people weren't aware of, a significant amount of employees weren't really aware about where they were, in their business and there was so much tension associated to that mid-year review and the end-year review, right? And leaders were actually saving their feedback, for that particular date, and they decided to just scrap those reviews. And they say, hey, you know what? We need to promote a culture of ongoing conversation. And it took a while. It took a while because leaders were not actually used to having these conversations on an ongoing basis. And although, I do believe that, in my business, we have quarterly performance assessment reviews in which we include development as part of the conversation. I think there still needs to be like a formal kind of point throughout the year in order to make sure that we document this properly and that and there's accountability and all of that good stuff. But actually, when we were setting this up, one of my team members said to me, but okay, it's okay to have this quarterly, but let's have a monthly check-in as well. So we have a monthly brief check-in just to force us to actually make sure that because life can get so busy and then, business can get so busy as well, right? So we're forced to now having those conversations, but we're still having them anyway. But so I really like the leadership role here as well. And then, such an important thing, Julie, defining what career development actually means. And I'm pretty sure that you were massively, that you played a massive role in influencing LinkedIn in their in their growth component now of appreciation and I wouldn't be surprised at all. Now, so, okay, we've talked about the company aspect, we've talked about the individual aspect. What else do you think needs to happen in this partnership to keep the career development element of the culture growing and evolving, besides the basic foundations that you've very clearly laid out in the past few minutes, Julie? What else is there to do?
The other thing is almost a deep dive on one of the things we were just talking about in terms of the ongoing conversation. Because development is a deeply human endeavor. It's not an administrative approach. You're right. Having those formal touch points ensures that we've got the data as an organization that we need, and it ensures that accountability. Even monthly meetings. I mean, that's so great to keep that kind of thread of development going. But what I found is that in organizations where development is really just part of the DNA, just so deeply embedded in the culture, the difference is that leaders don't sort development to the certain bucket in their head in a certain time of the month or the year. What they do is it's a lens or a filter that they use to interact day in and day out. It's so much a part of how they show up and what's kind of in the internal operating system going on all the time in the back of their minds, that they can't help but look for opportunities for growth and development. So for instance, when I pass someone in the hallway, if I'm really operating from a sense of my role is development, and I say, how's it going? And they're saying, I don't know, it's been a rough week. It's easy to say, next week will be better. It's okay. You got this. I know you could go that route for sure. And that would be, perfectly, a lot of leaders would do that. But a leader who's always operating from a place of development might just pause briefly. I'm not talking sitting down, going off in a corner, but saying, what's particularly hard for you this week? And hear a few words, a couple of sentences about that, and follow up with even one question. Well, which of your many strengths could you be using differently or more consciously to deal with some of those challenges? Or, what additional skills might you want to seek out that are going to make that, doing whatever that hard thing is, easier in the future? Or who else on the team might have some good feedback or advice for you about how to approach that? Just literally 2 minutes passing in the hallway could go from niceties to something that's really profound, that creates a new sense of awareness, perhaps a sense of commitment, motivation, even inspire action. When leaders have so deeply embedded this response, or maybe a better way to say it is this privilege that we have day in and day out to develop people, when that is so deeply a part of who I am as a leader, almost every interaction I have offers the opportunity for brief, but ongoing development. And that's when it doesn't become an extra thing that we're doing, a task, anything administrative. It's just how we operate within an organization.
All right. And now I have another question for you, Julie, which is actually something that we're debating in my business as well. And I'm hoping that with your advice, perhaps companies can make a decision on how to manage this component as well of the career development aspect. And it's a hot issue in my business right now. So the way we, every quarter when we have the performance assessment reviews, everyone ends up with a rating, and that particular rating has an impact on the bonus that they get each quarter. Now, the way that we've, and it's a weighted average, this rating. So there are 3 components to the rating. Component number 1 is directly linked to SMART goals, KPIs, key objectives, for the respective responsibilities. And that's very subjective. That's very objective. It's very clearly measured. The second factor is if they meet the company standards. Basically, have they behaved in a way that's aligned with our values of excellence, of innovation, of caring for clients, stuff like that. So there's a subjective element to it, but do you work collaboratively with team members? What's the quality of your work, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a subjective element to it, and but every single team member has to self-assess on those standards. Okay, so that's the second component. The first component is related to objective. The second component is related to how they achieve those objectives. And the third component has to do with professional and personal development. Okay, so basically, every quarter we have a conversation about what are your interests, what are your needs, and what is it that you need to do in order to meet those needs. So, for instance, is there a course that you want to take? Do you want to shadow someone else? Do you want to perhaps 10% of the time of your time dedicate to another role to see if you like it, whatever that might be. Okay, so we spend mindful time actually having those conversations. And as a business leader, I have to basically make sure that I assign the resources and make sure that I do the reshuffling that I need to do in order to accommodate those desires and those needs, from the employee. The very hot issue right now that we've got in the business is I understand that my performance rating can be impacted by whether I have achieved objectives and how I have achieved my objectives. But why is it that my performance rating needs to be influenced by whether or not I actually executed the actions that I outlined in my development plan? So it's like some people think it's fair, some people don't think it's fair, because some people, yes, I remember I moved to such country and I wanted to learn the local language, and I asked the company for support to study the language, and the support was given to me, but I was just too busy and I just didn't sign up for the courses, right? Why should I be penalized for that? It's a personal choice of mine whether I decided to actually take the courses or not. I mean, it's a decision on my development. So the question that I've got for you, Julie, is very concrete. What's your personal point of view, okay, as to whether the performance rating, which has an impact in the employee bonus, the performance rating should actually incorporate an element of assessing whether the employee is actually being held accountable for committing to what they wanted to do in the first place, right? Or should we completely eliminate the element of the rating associated with personal and professional development? I want to understand your point of view first, and then if you've seen this somewhere else, if you can just share that with us, Julie, that would be really cool.
I really appreciate that you're including that in the schema that determines bonuses. I think the fact that you're doing that speaks volumes about the commitment that you have as an organization to development. It's easy to just focus on the objective, business result, and even the, kind of the culture fit and behavior piece of it. Most organizations do that. Far fewer are holding people accountable to development. And the truth is, I think the time is right to do exactly what you're talking about. And here's why. Not growing is not an option, individually nor organizationally. The world is moving too fast. Things are changing too quickly for people to think that they can just sit where they are, do what they've done, and remain relevant going forward. So as organizations, I think it's really stepping up to our responsibility to light a fire under people and really help them understand the development imperative before us. Employees can't be complacent about this. So frequently people say, I'm happy in my current role. I don't need, all this development stuff. That's great. Delighted you're happy in your current role. And if you don't keep pushing the limits and growing within that role, you're going to find yourself off in a corner, unable to contribute. So the only way folks are going to be able to continue to hit those KPI numbers and get that part of the rating right is if they're hitting the development numbers as well. There's a direct relationship there. And to not commit to development that an organization like yours is offering is a huge missed opportunity. So I say, keep it up.
Thank you so much, because I've been kind of debating this in my head for a while, because I wanted to be, on the one hand, I want to be fair. I want for my team members to be happy as well. But on the other hand, I want the business to evolve, and I want for them to grow with the business as well, because I evolution is a constant in the universe, right? I mean, ever since the Big Bang, 14 billion years ago, everything it changes and everything evolves, every single aspect of nature. And just my feeling has always been aligning to that impulse of growth and evolution is just such a natural thing to do. Otherwise we would be living in a mummified world if nothing, were to change, right? And as the business evolves and grows, I mean, we need specific skills to be developed, etc. So thank you, Julie, for that piece of advice, because now I am going to be very more firm about this, and we are going to cement and institutionalize this forevermore, and there'll be no more doubts as to whether we should be doing this or not.
Two things to think about just as we wrap up this part of the conversation is, you started by talking about the role that learning development, career development plays in terms of employee engagement and well-being. And so to not hold people accountable to what we know is going to support their well-being and the organization's well-being isn't in anybody's best interest. So, and then the other thing is, you as an organization really need to practice what you're preaching in the process. And by making a commitment, this kind of a commitment to development, you're sending a really strong signal to your clients and to the world as a whole about, the importance of this. And I guess there's a third piece of this too. Here's the caution piece. As you move forward with this process, it's going to be important that the evaluation of that learning and development component be flexible and responsive and subjective as well. Because what could happen as a result of this is people say, okay, well, I know how to game this system. I'm just going to set a really low bar. All I'm going to learn is how to, do tiddlywinks or something, so that I can meet that part of it. And so, we do have to also bring some humanity to that piece and, take into consideration, somebody had this really ambitious goal, but there were some legitimate business factors that got in the way. Do we want to cut them off at the knees and penalize them for that? Or, bring some balance to that as well. So I think that's where the finessing comes in.
All right. So thank you. I have a team meeting on Monday, and I'm gonna feel I'm so energized now and strengthened by our conversation, Julie. And Julie, something else that I wanted to ask you about as well is, okay, as an employee, I think that I know what I want. I think that I know what I need. I think that I know where my interests lie. Again, challenge, connection, contribution, etc. But I don't know what's out there, right? So, what would your recommendation be when it comes to networking, when it comes to building relationships, when it comes to getting experience, on other areas of the business? What's your recommendation to employees seeking to really explore the world out there and the world within their business, of course, right? What are the practical steps that you would suggest for them to do?
So many of organizations I'm working with are developing opportunity marketplaces. And so I guess the first thing would be to check your organization and see, is there an opportunity marketplace where there are experiences, activities, projects, initiatives that are looking for talent? That would be an excellent opportunity for folks to be able to explore different parts of the business, different customer populations, whatever it might be, to strategically seek out the experiences that are going to fill the gaps or let them explore in ways that are interesting, while also contributing to the business, because those kinds of projects, move the business forwards. Seeking that out, I mean, that would be a good repository starting point for that kind of information. But, as you mentioned, so much of it really does have to do with relationships, our network, our community, the conversations that we're having. As we talked about earlier, once we make our interests and wants and goals and needs known, then others are in a better position to say, hey, I thought about this, or what about this for you? If we're not even putting that out there, folks don't know to make those kinds of connections. So I'd say that would be another really important thing for people to, I frequently will say career development is a team sport. In the past, it's sort of a one exclusive relationship between the employee and the leader. But now, especially in geographically distributed teams, hybrid, remote, all of that, we as individuals may have more contact with and visibility to and knowledge of opportunities for our peers. And so putting that out there, helping others understand how they can help you becomes key. And then I am increasingly a fan of AI or large language models as a tool, just a thought partner. And so someone might want to just go into whichever model they're working with and say, what are a few ways that I might find to express my interest in XYZ within the context of my role as a whatever it might be in my organization. It's not perfect, but I am increasingly impressed with the thought starters that we can get through this technology. And it might just spark something that would send somebody down a path that hadn't occurred to them otherwise.
Speaking of AI, I was a bit disillusioned. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago when I started forming a relationship with my AI companion through the voice of Scarlett Johansson. And so I would have lovely conversations with Scarlett Johansson about, a bunch of stuff that I would ask her advice about, compliance stuff and legal stuff. I mean, and we were just having a ball. And then the real Scarlett Johansson came into the picture and said, "This is not happening." And then ever since they changed her voice, it's like that she was taken away from me. And now I have to speak to someone else. I know. So I'm still thinking for a name for her. And then I have to kind of rekindle the relationship. But I think that you've mentioned something that's very important, thought starters, and I use it myself as well when I get a bit stuck, in my thinking. It really helps to spur, thinking in a different direction, perhaps, or perhaps variables that I wasn't considering as well. So that's a very good piece of advice, Julie. Thank you for that. That's really insightful. All right, Julia, as we're wrapping this up, I mean, what I want you to give a final message to both entities in this party, so the employee and the organization. So when it comes to career development, what's your message for those out there who want to again incorporate this element of growth in their professional life? What's your message to them?
For the individual, you need to really own your career development today. As I said earlier, nobody's going to care as much about it or be able to do as much about it as you. So starting really with redefining that relationship you want with your work and redefining what's most interesting, how you want to grow is the first step to being able to communicate that, and then to start taking proactive steps toward making that a reality. And on the other side of the equation, from a leadership perspective, start talking. Just talk to your people. Find some questions. There are plenty out there. You can use AI for that as well. Start engaging with folks on a regular basis around development so that it becomes just a habit, a natural cadence with which development finds its way, stealthily into all the conversations that you're having. Because once we are doing that, then, you talk about psychological safety, you talk about deep rapport, you talk about creating a culture that really offers sustainable growth, engagement, and thriving all the way around.
I love it. To the individual, own it, hold yourself accountable, and to the employer, start the conversation. We can later operationalize this and put frameworks around it and processes around it. But the first thing is to start the conversation. And then if you need those thought starters, from AI to get the conversation flowing, that helps. Fantastic. Julie, this has been a very enlightening conversation, particularly to me as well, because you've helped me process a bunch of stuff that I was kind of debating in my head. And now I've gotten so much clarity as to, what is it that I need to do to go forward. I'm hoping that our viewers and our listeners as well, have gotten, ideas and tips and suggestions and best practices that will help them kickstart this process. Because again, like I said at the beginning of the episode, lack of career development is a massive source of stress and anxiety to a significant number of people in the workforce. And if we were to tackle just this component, if we were to tackle just this psychosocial hazard, I mean, it would do the world so much good. Just this particular element, right? And again, it'll help businesses to evolve, and it'll help individuals to find fulfillment, because at the end of the day, people, we want material stuff. Yes, I mean, it gives us a sense of security. It could be fun, it gives us comfort. But at the end of the day, every single human being wants fulfillment, and there are many ways in which you can feel fulfilled. You can feel fulfilled, through the relationships in your life, but you need to find fulfillment in how you're being of service. And if you're being of service in a way that aligns with your wants and your needs, and and aligns with the business, I mean, what a better what a better scenario, right? So I'm just so happy, Julie, that I've had this conversation with you, because I'm pretty sure that those companies that have not started in this process yet will begin to have these conversations, and those individuals that haven't owned their career development, I think they'll be inspired by you to own their career development. Julie, thank you so much. But before I let you go, I'm going to put you on the spot now. So be ready for this, okay? I want you to share with us one or two heroes that you've had in your life, past or present. And by heroes, I mean people that have had a significant influence in you. And they don't necessarily have to be professional heroes. It's just any individual or even deity, okay, past or present, that you will consider yourself your personal heroes.
My dad. This is an easy one. My dad is a remarkable man. He, because he needed to begin working to care for his family, he had an 8th grade education and parlayed that into ultimately teaching at a junior college. He was a printer and had aspirations for our family that exceeded what a printer's salary could pull off. And so for most of my childhood, he worked 2 jobs to make sure that his kids had the education that he didn't get to have growing up. So he gave selflessly. You talk about contribution and service. This man was just such a model of that, and a model of love and a work ethic that has stayed with me to this day. So I have deep admiration for him and a real sense of responsibility to make the investment that he made paid off.
All right, that's so beautiful to hear, Julie. And one final question. Please complete the following sentence. The world would be a better place if...
We could do a lot of these, couldn't we? The world would be a better place. Okay, I'm just going to stay on brand here. If we all took responsibility for growing and developing every single day.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's on brand, and it actually, it says a lot about you as well, Julie. So incredible. Julie, again, thank you so much, for taking the time to speak with me and to share your knowledge, your insights, and your wisdom with our viewers and listeners. And hopefully there'll be a part 2 to this conversation. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people that will start the process and then start having questions about as the process unfolds, they might have questions about how to deal with certain things. And I hope that you can accept my invitation to have a part 2 of this conversation sometime in the future. All right, Julie, thank you so much. Have a great day.